ever happened to you? You're trying to slice a tomato or an onion or a piece of food and you cannot find a sharp knife, although you've invested quite a bit of money in the butcher block knife sets. Well, joining us to help us answer that problem is John Selick. I see you're sharpening the knives already right on set.
A sharp knife is a safe knife.
That is true. John Selick from University Hospitals, executive chef. Welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me again.
So my husband bought me this set last year.
I think it looks really nice.
And the one next to it missing some knives was the one from the old one we had.
Right.
And I felt like the new one just was not as good. How can a consumer pick out a knife set that will work for us in the home?
So a lot of times knife sets like these are, I mean, it's very attractive. It probably matches your kitchen really well. I got to tell you, they're going to sell you some knives that you don't need. Just from the home, from using at home, we have a nice chef knife here. It's about a 7 or 8 inch chef knife, your all-purpose knife.
Well, when you're saying all-purpose, what would that be for?
Cutting your onions, cutting your peppers, cutting your vegetables, cutting mushrooms. Then they also gave you a Santuco. This was a real popular knife like 10 years ago. I always thought it was too small. There was no rock to it. See, it's smaller than your all-purpose chef knife. People like it. It's very attractive. Not for me. They also gave you a tournée knife. This is for chefs only. There's no need for this because they also gave you the paring knife, which you will use.
Starting to feel like we wasted a little bit of money and
but
space.
It looks great. But it looks great on your counter. And then you have a boning knife here, which I don't know at home how often you're boning chickens, whole chickens. Most people already buy them all cut up. So I have the same knife. Like here is my boning knife, which I use to butcher stuff with, cut chickens, cut certain cuts of beef. But that's again, I'm using large portions of stuff, so you wouldn't at home. Now, depending on the price, it also came with a sharpener, which can be useful. The misconception is people will look at this right here and think this is the sharpener.
That's what I thought that was. I didn't even know what that was.
This will keep the knife honed, help keep it sharp, keep it fine-tuned, but it will not sharpen it. Once your knife is dull, and you just kind of take it, and at about 20 degrees angle, you just kind of rub it, and that will help bring it back, but it won't sharpen it. Once your knife is dull, you have to use a stone. Now, I brought this stone. This is an old school 3-way stone. It has a medium grind, a fine grind, and a coarse grind. You should only use the coarse grind if your knives are really, really dull, because it will take off metal.
Can a consumer buy this for their home?
I got this for like $100 on knifemerchant.com. They have them on Amazon. They also now have just single stones that you can buy probably much cheaper. Like this probably cost me like $100, I think. It's more of a professional, but I have knives that I use. And so I'll give you an idea of a professional knife. Like this is your everyday chef knife, and I think this is about 6 to 8 inches. This is my chef knife, and it's 12 inches because I'm cutting more celery than you. So this came in a $100 set. This knife here was at least $180. I've had this for like 10 years. And you can see, I mean, I've really used it a lot, so it's got some scratches on it. And when it's time to sharpen it, I showed you on my sharpening steel, 20 degrees, you can go this way too, and just try to, not a terrible amount of pressure, and go like this, and that will bring everything back in line. If it's dull, again, onto the stone, 20 degrees, and this is an oil stone, so I got some food-grade mineral oil on it, and this is going to sharpen it. Now, you can also take your knife to a professional sharpener, and they'll do a nice job. These are my tools. I carry my knives in a toolbox. A lot of chefs will also carry in a nice leather bag. People will call chefs artists, and I'm like, I don't know if I agree with that. We're more like carpenters. We have tools like a carpenter does. I bring them in a toolbox, and I got to maintain my tools. And so when I'm in the kitchen, somebody tries to use my knife, I kind of give them a dirty look, like, hey, that's my knife. That's my tool.
Yours.
Yeah.
So for a small investment, this might be worth for the consumer to buy this instead of keeping replacing your knives over and over again.
And so if you get those electric sharpeners too, that's a little too abrasive, and I think that takes a lot of metal off. And then you'll start getting your knives, and if you don't sharpen it right, you'll start getting like these waves in it to where then when you put it down, it's not touching the food. When I was right in culinary school, I still have my knife from culinary school. There's a nice wave into it because I didn't know what I was doing. I was pushing too hard. I was taking too much more metal off.
Well, now that we have you here, I think a common question for consumers is how do you cut a tomato properly or an onion? Can we demo one?
Absolutely. So I really think the best knife is a sharp knife. And I also like to use my serrated knife for tomatoes. Acid will dull a knife, lemons, limes, and even tomatoes. So I like to use my serrated knife. You have a bread knife that it's similar. I can probably use your bread knife. So if we were to cut, like let's say a dice that cut up pretty nicely. And I'm going to kind of cut it just like you would cut an onion, really. Kind of go in here.
John, this knife's never been used. So that's
why it's
probably why
bread.
I didn't know how to use it.
You're like, no, this is your bread knife, but again, and just use it. And I think that does a nice job with tomatoes.
Yeah, that looks really nice. So you basically cut it in half and then
Right. Or you can also like cut them,
that way. Okay.
if this was whole, and then flip these pieces over, and I'll just move this out of the side, and then cut this in and now you're making bruschetta topping or salsa. And yeah, I like to use my bread knife. My serrated knife has a little bit of angle to it, so I can even get a rock to it. So it's now another thing I want to tell you is like about my serrated knife here. My Japanese knife I have one that's $300, and I have this bread knife and this 12-inch chef knife. This is like $40, and it's one of my favorite knives. So price doesn't always mean necessarily quality. What knife you want to buy is what feels good in your hand, the balance. So I'm sort of a bigger guy. I like bigger knives. And I also will hold a knife. I'm not going to hold it back here. And I'm also not going to do this, because you start doing this, if you start rocking, you're going to start feeling a tension here. And you're going to maybe give yourself carpal tunnel if you do that for a very long time. So what happens
I'm not cooking enough, but for you.
So what happens is, I drop that finger and I actually pitch up a little bit on the knife. I'm actually holding the knife blade itself, which actually it makes the knife smaller and it gives me more control, more center of gravity. And then I'm able to sit there and kind of do things to rock the knife.
Lots of great tips for us. How can the viewers reach you if they have some more questions about cooking or knife skills?
You can tweet at me on Twitter. I'm on Twitter, usually telling a lot of bad jokes or whatever. But if you want to tweet at me any kind of cooking questions or knife maintenance, it's my name, @John Selick, one word.
How do you spell Selick?
Selick.
Perfect. Thank you so much for being with us. We'll be right back with more Mind, Body, and Spirit.